There's a moment, quiet, subtle, often missed, when you stop seeking and start remembering. It doesn't come with fireworks, it doesn't announce itself, but when it hits, you feel it everywhere. You're no longer chasing answers, you're no longer trying to fix yourself, you're no longer looking out there for something to make sense of in here. Because something finally clicks. You've been orbiting your entire life, spinning around people, beliefs, achievements, even spiritual paths, but never quite centered. Until now. Because now, you're beginning to align with Source. And when you do, everything starts to rearrange. Your thoughts slow down, not because you're trying to meditate, but because your mind stops fighting your nature. Your body relaxes, not because you found the right posture, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. And your reality, it shifts. People fall away, new paths appear, synchronicities multiply. Because when you align with Source, you're no longer broadcasting confusion. You're transmitting clarity, not as a performance, as a frequency. And that frequency changes everything. Not because the world bends to your will, but because you finally stopped resisting the flow of what already wants to happen. You stop asking life to obey your mind, and start trusting your essence to guide your steps. Alignment with Source isn't a lightning strike, it's a return. A slow, cellular recalibration back to your original setting. It begins when you stop trying to manifest from lack and start remembering that you are the channel, not the beggar. See, for most of your life, you were taught that power lives somewhere else, in others, in books, in systems, in some version of success that always stays a few steps out of reach. And so, you hustled for peace. You performed for love. You chased purpose as if it was lost outside of you. But Source never moved. It was always here, beneath the static of expectation. It was humming under every gut feeling you ignored, every intuitive nudge you silenced, every moment of awe you brushed off as just coincidence. The reason your life felt off, the relationships, the work, the goals, wasn't because you weren't trying hard enough. It was because you were trying to live misaligned, trying to thrive on frequencies that weren't designed for you. When you start aligning with Source, you stop chasing and start tuning. You begin to notice how certain people drain your energy, how certain words tighten your chest, how certain dreams never belonged to you in the first place. You shed the roles. You release the projections. You stop performing to be seen, and instead begin witnessing yourself. And it's not ego, it's essence. Because Source doesn't inflate you, it centers you. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand, it invites. And when you say yes to that invitation, not out of fear, not out of ambition, but out of deep resonance, the universe doesn't reward you, it mirrors you. It starts showing up with the same integrity, the same precision, the same stillness you've cultivated inside. And for the first time, you don't just feel alive, you feel home. Let's get something straight. Alignment is not aesthetic. It's not about having the right crystals, speaking the right affirmations, or curating a spiritual lifestyle. Alignment is energetic, it's raw, it's often uncomfortable, because it requires you to stop outsourcing your truth, even to your favorite teachings. When you align with Source, you begin to feel what is authentic versus what is simply familiar. You start to notice when your yes is performative, when your goals are echoes of someone else's desires, when your spiritual practices are rituals of avoidance, not remembrance. And one by one, you start letting go. Not with drama, not with force, but like a snake shedding old skin, because the identity just doesn't fit anymore. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your path. You stop clinging to beliefs that once gave you security, but now feel like cages. Because when you're aligned, clarity replaces effort. Silence feels like communion, and the unknown is no longer terrifying. It's magnetic. You wake up differently. There's a steadiness, a quiet sense that you're no longer chasing life, you're meeting it. And this doesn't mean chaos disappears. It means you stop reacting from fear and start responding from center. Old patterns still rise, but you witness them without collapse. Challenges still appear, but they don't pull you out of alignment. You start choosing from a different place, not from ego, not from lack, but from resonance. And that changes everything. Because now, you're living from coherence, and coherence creates ripples. Your relationships shift, your creativity expands, opportunities arise, not because you hustled harder, but because you stopped resisting what was always meant for you. This is what Source alignment does. It doesn't fix your life, it reorders it, from the inside out. You want to know what real power feels like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't need to declare itself. Real power feels like alignment, and alignment feels like silence in a world addicted to noise. It feels like clarity in a moment of chaos, Not because the world changed, but because you stopped vibrating with the confusion. It feels like ease, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of inner war. Because the most violent part of disconnection isn't what happens around you, it's what happens inside you. That constant tug of war between who you are and who you've been pretending to be, between what feels true and what feels safe, between what your soul knows and what your mind fears. And the longer you live out of alignment, the louder that inner static gets. Anxiety, burnout, doubt, endless striving with no sense of arrival. But when you finally begin to align, you don't need more energy. You stop leaking it. You don't need new strategies. You stop sabotaging the ones that already wanted to work. And suddenly, life starts flowing through you instead of happening to you. You speak differently, not rehearsed, but from presence. You act differently, not out of impulse, but out of resonance. You attract differently, not based on effort, but on energetic permission. Because now, you're not pushing reality, you're partnering with it. And here's the part they don't teach you. Alignment is not about control, it's about trust. Trusting your timing, trusting your detours, trusting that the version of you who craves alignment is already aligned more than they realize. The shift is subtle, but once it clicks, everything calibrates. If something inside you just exhaled in recognition, subscribe and hit the bell. You're not chasing alignment anymore, you're living it. So what happens next? Once you've tasted alignment, even for a second, you can't unfeel it. You can't go back to forcing what never fit. You can't keep pretending that the numbness was normal, because something shifts in your internal compass, not mentally, but energetically. You start choosing different foods, not because of a diet, but because your body asks for nourishment, not stimulation. You start craving solitude, not out of isolation, but because your nervous system recognizes peace over performance. You stop reacting to triggers the way you used to, because you now see them not as attacks, but as invitations. Every emotion becomes data, every conflict becomes feedback, every breakdown becomes a doorway, and behind each doorway is more of your true self, waiting to be remembered. You start realizing that Source was never just some mystical concept. It's been the underlying intelligence behind everything. The timing, the losses, the strange synchronicities, the relationships that broke you open, the dead ends that redirected you. All of it was communication. And now that you're listening, not with your ears but with your frequency, the world becomes interactive. You start to feel guided, not by signs, but by inner alignment. The right path doesn't feel like excitement. It feels like certainty without logic. And your boundaries? They no longer come from defense. They come from reverence. You no longer tolerate what drains you, not out of anger, but because you've remembered your own value. You are no longer a seeker scrambling through information. You've become a signal, broadcasting coherence into every space you enter. And the ones meant to find you? They will. Not because you're louder, but because your energy is clear. But here's where most people slip. They think alignment means perfection, that once you're in tune, nothing will go wrong, that everything will be smooth, beautiful, and certain. That's not alignment. That's a fantasy. Alignment doesn't mean no resistance. It means your resistance doesn't run you anymore. You still feel fear, but you don't build your decisions on it. You still experience doubt, but you don't outsource your worth to temporary emotions. You still hit rough patches, but you don't collapse into old stories. Because alignment doesn't eliminate the storm, it becomes the stillness within it. When you're connected to Source, your internal signal gets strong enough to override the static. You don't need to control the waves. You become the ocean. People may question you. Your old circles may drift. Even your identity may start dissolving. And you'll feel it. The pull to shrink, to explain, to return to who you were just to stay safe. But the aligned version of you, they won't let you go back. Because alignment remembers. It remembers what it feels like to breathe freely, to move from intuition without apology, to stop editing your presence to make others comfortable. And the more you stay in this frequency, the more magnetic you become. Not because of what you do, but because of what you stop doing. You stop proving. You stop chasing. You stop diluting your truth to maintain peace that was never real. And here's the wild part. The universe doesn't reward alignment with comfort. It rewards it with capacity. Capacity to hold more light, more love, more truth, not as a burden, as a natural consequence of finally remembering what you're built for. You know you're aligned with Source when life stops being about control and starts being about communion, not just with people or nature or the moment, but with the intelligence behind it all. You feel it when your intuition speaks louder than logic. You feel it when you lose interest in conflict because peace inside you no longer tolerates chaos outside you. You feel it when you don't need to explain your path anymore, because those who resonate already understand, and those who don't simply don't matter. This is when life gets quiet, not boring, sacred. You start to measure success differently, not in outcomes, but in alignment, not in applause, but in internal resonance, not in how much, but in how true. And when others ask what changed, you won't be able to explain it clearly, because it wasn't one thing. It was a series of tiny, honest choices that led you back to yourself. Choices to rest instead of rush, to speak up instead of swallow truth, to release instead of hold tighter, to stop performing and just be. And suddenly, your entire life starts reflecting the inner shift. Not because the world got easier, but because you stopped resisting your design. You stopped trying to be who you thought you should be, and gave yourself full permission to be who you already are. That version of you doesn't chase peace. They radiate it. They don't demand clarity. They create space for it to emerge. They don't live for the future. They live as a signal to the present. And that signal, whether you realize it or not, is already awakening others. Because aligned people don't just live differently. They change the atmosphere around them, quietly, powerfully, unshakably. Let's be real. This level of alignment doesn't make you invincible. It makes you transparent, not weak, not exposed, but honest enough to no longer hide behind polished versions of yourself. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop packaging your truth to make it more palatable for people still asleep. And in that space, you stop needing validation, because you've become your own reference point. You know when something is aligned, not because someone approved it, but because your nervous system doesn't flinch around it. You know when a yes is real, because your entire body opens, and when a no is truth, because everything inside you tightens. This is the kind of clarity they can't teach you in books. You have to become it. And becoming it means releasing every version of you that was built just to survive. It means grieving who you had to be when you weren't free. It means forgiving the past, not because it was okay, but because you refused to carry the weight of it into a life rooted in presence. That's the real alchemy of alignment. It transforms survival into sovereignty. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What feels real?" You stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "Does this honor who I am now?" And when that becomes your compass, everything outside of alignment starts to fall away. Friends fade, jobs collapse, habits dissolve, not out of drama, out of natural incompatibility. Because when you tune your life to source, anything that isn't resonant will feel like static. And eventually, you'll have no choice but to either dim yourself back down or rise into what's next. And you're choosing the rise. So here we are, not at the end of a video, but at the beginning of something ancient. A remembering, a returning, a realignment with what's always been inside you, waiting, watching, whispering. You've lived entire seasons of your life disconnected from this truth, thinking you needed fixing, thinking you needed more time, more knowledge, and more permission. But what if none of that was ever true? What if alignment with Source was never about becoming worthy, but about realizing you already are? No more seeking, no more earning, no more shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed for your frequency. You are not random, you are not broken, you are not behind. You are remembering, and in doing so, you're starting to transmit differently. That transmission won't be understood by everyone, but it's not meant to be. Your energy isn't here to please, it's here to activate. And that activation has a ripple. Maybe it starts with you changing how you breathe, how you speak, how you walk into a room. Then it changes how others feel around you, how they reflect back your clarity, how their own remembering is triggered just by being in your presence. This isn't personal development, this is energetic evolution. You're not just changing your habits, you're changing your field. And in that shift, reality bends, not because you're forcing it, but because you've stopped resisting your own design. So here's the invitation. What have you started to remember recently that you were taught to ignore? A feeling, a pattern, a knowing too big to explain? Drop it in the comments, not just for you, but for someone else who's been waiting to see their truth reflected back in your words. Because alignment isn't just internal, it's collective, and this is how it begins.